I wasn't sure what to expect when my new alien maid arrived. The job description had promised efficiency, intelligence, and an otherworldly charm, but I hadn't prepared for just how chaotic charm could be. She glided into my apartment with a grace that made even the furniture seem awkward. Her skin shimmered faintly, shifting colors as she moved, like she carried a living sunset on her body. Her eyes, large, glowing, and somehow mischievous, fixed on me with a curious intensity. She tilted her head, smiling in that alien way that was equal parts adorable and unnervingly confident, and immediately asked if she could test my human reactions while doing chores. I blinked. Test what now? She hummed lightly, a sound that vibrated pleasantly in my chest, and leaned closer, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. Peek, she said. It is necessary. For science. I swallowed hard, feeling my face heat up. Peek? Yes, she replied, tilting her head as if that clarified everything. I need you to observe my technique. Humans respond, interestingly, when they watch. I didn't know whether to laugh, run, or faint, but before I could decide, she floated over to the laundry basket. And that's when the first chaos began. She lifted a shirt, whispered something incomprehensible in a language that made the walls vibrate, and suddenly the shirt floated upward. Then the rest of the laundry followed. Socks, pants, even a scarf started zooming through the air, spinning in impossible patterns, defying gravity entirely. Oh, she said casually. This is normal. I froze, mouth open. The socks were hurtling toward me like tiny, spinning missiles. One bounced off my shoulder, another twirled past my ear. I tried to step back, but in this new zero-gravity chaos, my foot slipped, and I stumbled, arms flailing. She laughed, a musical trill that made my stomach tighten in ways I didn't want to admit, and floated toward me, effortlessly catching a flying sock before it hit my face. You peek, she teased, her glowing eyes narrowing playfully. You observe. Fascinating. I muttered something incoherent, trying to look casual while my brain screamed that I had no idea what was happening. Every piece of clothing zoomed past me again, and somehow, I ended up holding a floating bra, mid-air, frozen in terror and embarrassment. She floated beside me, eyeing my reaction like a scientist inspecting a lab rat, except the lab rat was blushing furiously and desperately trying to look unbothered. You are very reactive, she said, her voice soft but teasing. This is excellent. More data. I swallowed hard, my mind racing. Am I supposed to catch this? Peek, she reminded me with a slight wag of her finger, and the word carried a weight I couldn't ignore. I peeked, in the sense that I watched, but that only made my face hotter. She twirled the floating shirt in front of me, making it almost impossible not to notice the contours of her body underneath her uniform, or whatever the alien equivalent was. You blush, she noted, voice low. Curious. Fascinating. The laundry continued its impossible dance, bouncing off walls, ceiling, and my own flailing arms. Somehow, a sock landed on my head, sliding down over my eyes, and she laughed so loudly it made me blush even more. I tried to act normal, tried to appear composed, but I was failing spectacularly, and she was clearly enjoying it. Peek closer, she said suddenly, leaning toward me, her glowing eyes sparkling with mischief. You will understand the subtle techniques better if you observe, intimately. My mind scrambled. Intimately? We were talking about laundry, weren't we? And yet I felt a strange pull toward her, a combination of embarrassment, curiosity, and something warmer, something undeniably magnetic. I peeked closer, just as she swirled a shirt around herself, letting it float in front of her in the most ridiculous, flirtatious way imaginable. Very good, she murmured, noting my reaction like it was a perfectly timed experiment. Humans are entertaining creatures. I groaned internally, trying to focus on anything besides her teasing smile, and the way her body seemed to move like water in zero gravity. She picked up another sock and twirled it, floating toward me, deliberately brushing it past my face. I jumped back instinctively, but she floated closer again, catching my arm lightly with her hand. "Peek," she whispered, her tone both commanding and playful. I couldn't help it. I peeked. My heart raced. The floating laundry continued its absurd, impossible ballet, but my attention was entirely on her. Every motion was deliberate, teasing, alien in a way that was impossible to describe. She leaned slightly closer, whispering something in her melodious alien tongue, and the vibration in her voice sent shivers down my spine. "You like observing," she noted, eyes glowing faintly brighter. "Do not deny. It is part of human nature, yes?" I'd opened my mouth to protest but realized I couldn't even form words. My cheeks burned, my thoughts jumbled, and I found myself laughing helplessly at the absurdity of it all. Floating laundry, impossible physics, and a teasing alien maid who somehow made this the most intense, confusing, and strangely thrilling experience of my life. By the time the last sock landed neatly back in the basket, I was breathless, disheveled, and completely under her spell. She tilted her head, her smile widening. "This is only the beginning," she said. "More experiments will follow. More peaks. Are you ready?" I swallowed hard, my pulse racing in ways I didn't want to admit. Somehow I knew I was ready. The chaos, the absurdity, and the teasing allure of this alien maid had me hooked, and I couldn't wait to see what happened next. And so I obliged. The next day, I found myself nervously anticipating the arrival of the alien maid. Somehow, after yesterday's laundry chaos, I had convinced myself that this wasn't just about chores, it was a test of courage, curiosity, and apparently my ability to blush on command. She arrived as usual, gliding into the apartment like gravity was merely a suggestion, her eyes sparkling with that same mischievous gleam. She held a bottle of luminescent liquid, swirling inside it like some sort of miniature galaxy. "Today," she announced, "we explore the human response to soap." I froze. "Soap?" "Yes," she said, tilting her head as if the concept were perfectly ordinary. "But not just any soap. It reacts to human presence. Watch carefully, or you may miss subtle nuances." Before I could protest, she poured the liquid onto the floor, and almost immediately, glowing bubbles began to form, wobbling in the air as though alive. They pulsed gently, shifting color from neon green to bright pink, and occasionally floated toward me like tiny, mischievous jellyfish. I instinctively stepped back, but she hovered in front of me, eyes gleaming, and whispered, "Peek closer. You will learn more that way." I blinked. "Learn, what exactly?" She didn't answer. Instead, she began her cleaning ritual, a combination of twirls, spins, and exaggerated gestures that seemed designed both to tidy and to mesmerize. Each movement sent bubbles drifting toward me, clinging to my clothes and hair in ways I didn't know how to respond to. I tried to act normal, but my hands flailed, my face burned, and I tripped over a stray floating sock from yesterday's laundry session. She laughed, a soft, musical trill, and leaned closer, her scent faintly sweet and oddly intoxicating. "Excellent," she said. "Observe how humans react to unpredictability." I peeked again, more cautiously this time, and immediately, a bubble burst on my shoulder, splashing glowing liquid that cooled but tingled oddly. I yelped and tried to wipe it off, only to find another bubble attaching itself to my arm. She floated gracefully around me, letting them hover between us, occasionally popping one with her finger and giggling at my startled expression. "You are highly reactive," she noted, leaning closer so that the glow from the soap reflected off her skin in hypnotic patterns. "Fascinating data. Keep observing. Keep peeking." I swallowed hard. Her teasing tone, the playful glint in her eyes, and the absurdity of glowing bubbles sticking to me made it impossible to focus. I wanted to complain, to act annoyed, but somehow, I was laughing along with her chaotic choreography. Every peek I took seemed to trigger a new eruption of floating soap. A bubble bounced off my nose, another exploded on my shoulder, and I was suddenly tangled in a cascade of glowing foam, slipping and sliding across the floor. She floated beside me effortlessly, her movements precise and teasing, letting the bubbles stick to her form in ways that were absurdly intimate without ever crossing the line. Closer, she whispered suddenly, tilting her head, eyes locking with mine. You see better if you are attentive. I hesitated, then leaned slightly forward, and immediately, a stream of floating bubbles zipped past me, brushing against my cheek. My heart raced, and I realized my breathing was shallow, caught somewhere between embarrassment, excitement, and the pure absurdity of the situation. She smiled, clearly delighted by the effect she was having, and gave a small twirl that sent more bubbles flying toward me. I stumbled backward, catching a floating sponge that seemed to have a mind of its own, and she laughed, a sound that vibrated pleasantly through the room. You humans are delicate, she said, her voice soft but teasing. Yet charming when flustered. Peek more. Learn everything. By now, the apartment was a mess of glowing soap bubbles, floating clothes, and bits of yesterday's laundry still drifting lazily. I was slipping, tripping, and trying desperately to act composed, but every glance at her made me flinch, blush, and laugh simultaneously. She floated closer, deliberately letting a bubble drift over my hand, then popped it with a flick of her finger. Perfect reaction, she murmured. Observe more. Engage fully. I obeyed, peeking and failing spectacularly every time. A sock landed on my head, a bubble exploded near my chest, and I slipped into a glowing puddle, catching only a glimpse of her amused expression. She tilted her head, eyes narrowing playfully. You are most entertaining. More data, please. Somehow, amidst the chaos, I realized I wasn't just observing. I was captivated. Every playful gesture, every teasing glance, every absurd explosion of soap and floating laundry drew me closer to her. She was chaotic, alien, ridiculous, and somehow utterly irresistible. The combination of flustered embarrassment and growing attraction made me laugh and groan in equal measure. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of floating bubbles and slapstick disasters, she clapped her hands. The bubbles vanished, settling harmlessly on the floor, glowing faintly before fading. I was drenched in glowing residue, tangled in floating clothes, and utterly exhausted. She floated before me, arms crossed, eyes glittering, and said softly, You see, humans are amusing and interesting. I tried to catch my breath, feeling ridiculous, exposed, and inexplicably thrilled all at once. Somehow, I had survived the chaos, and somehow, I was already anticipating the next peak, the next experiment, the next round of absurdly flirtatious disaster. Her laughter echoed in my ears, teasing, melodic, and hypnotic, and I realized I was hooked. She tilted her head, glancing at me with that same mischievous spark. Tomorrow, she whispered, we will escalate. More chaos. More learning. Are you ready? I nodded, even though I had no idea what I was agreeing to. Somehow, I knew it didn't matter. I was ready. I would peak. I would endure. I would laugh, blush, and maybe even fall a little more under her spell. And I couldn't wait. By the third day, I had learned two things. First, my alien maid was a master of orchestrating absolute chaos, and second, I was completely incapable of maintaining any sense of composure around her. I thought yesterday's soap and bubble fiasco had pushed me to my limits, but apparently she had other plans. She floated into the apartment holding a collection of strange gadgets, all glowing faintly and humming in ways that made the hair on my arms stand on end. Her smile widened, a mixture of mischief and pride, as she surveyed my nervous posture. Today, she said, we combine all techniques for maximum observation. Laundry, soap, gadgets, all synchronized. You will peek, and you will react. This is advanced data gathering. I gulped. Peek. React. I had learned what that meant by now, and my stomach twisted in anticipation. I nodded, knowing resistance was futile, yet secretly hoping gravity, or something, would intervene. She began by flipping open a small device that emitted soft pulses, sending floating socks, shirts, and even a few stray pants into the air, spinning in dizzying patterns. At the same time, she poured a vial of glowing soap onto the floor, which immediately bubbled and expanded into floating orbs, sticking to walls, ceiling, and occasionally to my hair. She hummed lightly as she moved through the chaos, guiding each levitating garment and bubble with elegant precision. I stared, trying to make sense of the scene before me. Socks zipped past my face, shirts twisted in midair like ribbons, and the soap bubbles occasionally burst, releasing glowing sparks that adhered to my clothes. Every time I peeked at her, she seemed to take delight in exaggerating her movements, leaning closer to show me the perfect way to fold a shirt mid-flight, or deliberately letting a bubble cling to my arm while she floated by. "Observe closely," she instructed, her tone low and teasing. "Notice the human response to controlled chaos." I did observe, too closely in fact. My face burned with embarrassment as her glowing eyes locked onto mine while she guided a floating shirt directly past my chest. I flinched, yelped, and stumbled back, only to trip over a hovering sock, sending another flying toward her. She caught it effortlessly, laughing, a melodic trill that somehow made my heart race faster. "You are fascinating," she murmured, tilting her head. "Humans are easily startled. And easily amused. Perfect subjects." I groaned inwardly. Fascinating, maybe? Perfect, certainly not. Yet there was something in the way she moved, the way she teased, the gentle brush of a floating sleeve across my arm, that made me weak in the knees. The combination of absurdity, physical comedy, and subtle intimacy was entirely overwhelming. Then came the gadgets. She pulled out a contraption that resembled a hovering tray, spinning several small orbs on it. With a flick of her fingers, the orbs zipped across the room, bouncing off the floating laundry and exploding into bursts of glowing mist when they hit the walls, or occasionally me. One exploded near my shoulder, leaving a sparkling residue that tingled strangely. She giggled at my reaction, tilting her head as if noting every blush, every flinch, every stammered protest. "Peek again," she said softly, drifting closer. "Closer. You will see subtleties humans often miss." I obeyed, peeking despite knowing it would only make me flustered, and of course it did. A bubble drifted past my face, popping against my cheek, and a floating sock brushed against my hand. She leaned near, guiding a floating shirt to hover almost teasingly in front of me. My face heated uncontrollably, but she only smiled wider, clearly savoring my reaction. The chaos escalated further, as she combined the gadgets with laundry and soap. Clothes whirled in spirals around my legs, bubbles attached themselves to my hair and shirt, and glowing orbs bounced off walls with comical timing. Every attempt I made to intervene or tidy up failed spectacularly, and she only laughed, floating gracefully through the storm of flying garments and exploding bubbles. "You are utterly entertaining," she murmured, drifting near enough that her glowing skin reflected on my own in warm hues. "Humans and their reactions, so delicate. And appealing." Appealing? My brain froze for a moment, caught between panic, embarrassment, and something else I wasn't entirely prepared to acknowledge. Somehow, amidst the absurd chaos, I realized I wasn't just reacting. My heart was racing, my mind was buzzing, and a strange, thrilling warmth spread through my chest. She was chaotic, teasing, and overwhelmingly alien, yet I couldn't deny the pull she had on me. As I stumbled backward into a puddle of glowing soap, trying and failing to maintain balance, she floated over effortlessly, letting a strand of glowing liquid brush my arm. "Perfect data," she said, voice soft and intimate, her eyes locked on mine. "Human responses, highly informative. And quite endearing." By the time the final sock floated neatly into a basket and the last bubble popped, leaving sparkling residue clinging to furniture, clothes, and me, I was breathless, drenched in glowing soap, and utterly defeated. She tilted her head, eyes glimmering, and gave me a slow, teasing smile that made my pulse spike. "You survived," she said, voice almost gentle now, though the sparkle of mischief never left her eyes. "You peaked, you reacted, and you learned. Excellent progress." I tried to speak, to protest or claim some dignity, but my words failed me. Instead, I simply laughed, shaking my head in disbelief at the chaos, the absurdity, and the undeniable thrill of it all. Somehow, I had survived the most ridiculous experiment yet, and somehow, I was even more captivated by her than before. She floated closer, brushing past me deliberately so a trail of sparkling soap adhered to my sleeve. "Tomorrow," she whispered, "we escalate. More chaos, more observation. Are you ready?" I nodded automatically, even though every nerve in my body was screaming in protest and anticipation. Somehow I knew that I was ready. I had to be. There was no turning back from this absurd, flirtatious, chaotic dance she had drawn me into, and deep down, I didn't want to. By the fourth day, I had resigned myself to the fact that my apartment was no longer mine. It was her laboratory, her playground, and apparently her stage. She floated in, glowing softly, a mischievous grin tugging at the corners of her lips. In her hands were every device, gadget, and floating laundry item she had accumulated over the previous days. Today, she announced, would be the ultimate test, the grand combination of every chaotic experiment, all in one orchestrated display of absurdity. "You are ready, yes?" she asked, eyes gleaming with amusement and something warmer, something that made my chest tighten. I nodded, trying not to tremble, knowing full well that ready was a relative term. As soon as I agreed, she flicked her fingers, and the apartment erupted into controlled madness. Clothes lifted off the floor, twirling in spirals around my legs. Floating socks zipped past my face like mischievous missiles, and glowing soap bubbles bounced around, some bursting in sprays of shimmering light that landed on my clothes, my hair, and inevitably my arms. I tried to step back, to avoid catastrophe, but every movement seemed to trigger more chaos. A pair of pants floated at my chest level, spinning like a hypnotic pendulum. I jumped to avoid it, only to slip on a bubble that popped beneath my foot, sending me sliding across the glowing floor. She laughed, a soft trill that made my stomach flip, and floated gracefully toward me, arms outstretched as if to guide me through the disaster she had created. "Peek," she said, eyes locked on mine, voice teasing yet soft. "Closer. Observe fully." I obeyed, leaning forward despite the danger, and immediately, a floating shirt zipped past my chest, brushing my arm. Another bubble popped against my shoulder. I stumbled into a spinning sock that somehow wrapped around my ankle, sending me into a minor spin. She hovered beside me effortlessly, the epitome of calm in a hurricane of chaos, and let a trail of glowing soap drift over my sleeve. "You humans are utterly fascinating," she murmured, drifting closer. "Your reactions, exquisite." I groaned, torn between laughter, embarrassment, and a heat that I couldn't ignore. Every glance at her was a mixture of terror and attraction. Her movements were fluid, alien, and hypnotic, and every playful gesture, every flick of a hand, every teasing tilt of her head, drew me further into her world. I was supposed to be observing, reacting, maybe learning something about human behavior, but all I could do was flail helplessly, blush uncontrollably, and marvel at the absurdity and allure of it all. She waved a small device, and suddenly, the floating clothes started spinning in more intricate patterns, almost like a bizarre, airborne ballet. Socks zipped past in perfect timing with bubbles popping in bursts of colored light. I dodged a sock, ducked under a floating shirt, and slipped on a bubble that sent me sliding into a glowing puddle, arms flailing. She laughed, drifting over with a bubble clinging to her finger, and deliberately popped it near my cheek, making me yelp. "Perfect," she said, tilting her head as her glowing eyes softened. "Observe everything. Feel everything. React fully." I did. Every flustered blush, every stumble, every nervous glance was recorded, at least in her amused mind. I couldn't stop myself from laughing, slipping, spinning, and stumbling, and somehow, through all the chaos, I noticed the way she floated toward me when I faltered, guiding me with the softest touch of her hand. My pulse raced, my stomach flipped, and I realized that amidst the absurd comedy, I felt something else entirely, something warmer, deeper, and utterly confusing. She leaned close, letting a glowing strand of soap trail along my arm. "Humans," she whispered, her voice low and melodic. "So easily, charming when flustered. So adorable." I tried to speak, but my words failed me. All I could do was laugh, blush, and watch as she twirled another shirt through the air, letting it float near my chest in the most ridiculous and flirtatious way imaginable. I stumbled again, this time almost falling into a pile of glowing laundry, and she caught me effortlessly, her eyes glimmering with something that went beyond mischief. The room was a riot of chaos, floating clothes, exploding bubbles, glowing soap residue, and buzzing gadgets, but somehow, it felt intimate. She hovered close, teasing, laughing, and guiding the madness with effortless grace. I was drenched, exhausted, and overwhelmed, but I couldn't deny the thrill, the heat, the absurdly electric tension between us. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of slipping, dodging, and laughing uncontrollably, the chaos subsided. Clothes settled gently into piles, soap bubbles faded into harmless sparkling residue, and the gadgets powered down. I collapsed into a heap on the floor, tangled in floating laundry and glowing residue, gasping for breath, heart hammering in my chest. She floated down beside me, eyes soft now, though the teasing glimmer never left them. She brushed a strand of glowing soap from my shoulder with a delicate touch. "You survived," she murmured, voice low, almost intimate. "You peaked, you reacted, and you learned. Perfect progress." I tried to respond, tried to claim some dignity, but all that came out was a breathless laugh. She smiled, her presence overwhelming in its warmth and mischief, and suddenly, the absurdity of the chaos, the flustered reactions, and the teasing flirtation didn't matter. All that mattered was her. She leaned closer, letting her glowing form hover near mine, the soft luminescence highlighting every curve, every teasing gesture. "Tomorrow," she whispered, eyes locking with mine, "we may have more experiments, but perhaps, also, a pause. To explore other, human responses." My chest tightened, heat rushing to my face, and despite the exhaustion, the mess, and the ridiculousness of the day, I nodded. Yes. I was ready. For more chaos, more peaks, more experiments, and maybe, just maybe, for the next step in whatever this strange, alien, flirtatious connection was becoming. And for the first time, I realized that I wasn't just surviving her chaos, I was enjoying it. Every flustered reaction, every slip, every blush, every teasing glance pulled me closer, drawing me into her world in ways I hadn't expected. Chaos, flirtation, and absurdity had become the perfect backdrop for something entirely human: fascination, attraction, and a spark that promised more than just comedy, it promised connection. And so, as the last glowing bubble faded and the final sock floated lazily into a pile, I looked at her and smiled, breathless, flustered, and undeniably captivated. I had peaked, I had reacted, and in the process I had fallen, just a little, for my alien maid.